Hey guys, welcome back to the Engineered Angler. We're gonna make a lure this week. It's gonna be a 3 or 4 part swim bait. 4 part. I've already drawn it on the dry erase board. Let me show you what it looks like. So this is what I'm talking about. Now, maybe at first glance it doesn't look any different from most of the 3 part or 4 part swim baits that I've actually made on this channel, but there's something a little bit different. And I'll give you a hint. It's at the head, specifically the joint at the head. If you see, the shape of that joint has a deep curve, kind of aligned with what would be a gill plate on the fish. So the hinge for this isn't going to be here. It's actually going to be right here at these little steps. So we'll have a hinge pin going right through here. And in these 2 locations, the hinge pin will be going back through here. And you can see the slots. There'll be hinge eyes going into there, and for the tail section as well. Just like this one, you can clearly see the slot and the little loop arrangement. Imagine this is the center line of the lure looking down on the lure. The widest part of the lure is going to be somewhere right before this hinge, and it's going to have just a kind of a natural taper. And then the gill plate will stick out just a little bit and then sort of flatten out towards the nose. Imagine that's perfectly symmetrical about that center line. And then the hinge point is going to be somewhere around here. So the main body will come to a sort of a rounded edge. Something like that. A little rough drawing, but more or less like that. We'll have a pinhole right here to drive that pin. So the head will actually pivot, and because it actually extends inside the body, as it pivots, if you can imagine, if it pivots to the right, then the inside surface of the gill plate will be exposed. And that's the key to this design, believe it or not. What I'm trying to do is have a lure that as it's swimming, the head is pivoting back and forth, opening that gill back and forth. And that inside surface is going to be super shiny and red. So probably silver plate and probably some candy apple finish. We'll put a little bit of a fin up here just for aesthetics, and then we'll have a fiber tail just to give it a more lifelike look. We're going to have to work out where the center of area is for the side of this lure and have our tie-on eye in the location where that line is. Belly hook eye here and a tail / belly hook eye right there. So that's the plan. Let's go find a piece of wood and start carving this thing out. All right, so let's go ahead and pick out a piece of wood. I've got a box of sort of pre-cut pieces for making lures. And I was recently on a podcast just a week or so ago where they asked me a question that I thought was really a cool question. They asked me if there was anything I wanted to debunk about sort of common lure making beliefs out there that I thought was really misleading or not accurate at all. And my answer was wood. That wood really doesn't matter. What kind of wood you use, as long as you can get the weight you want and the shape you want, the volume is going to be there, the density will work itself out. As long as you can get that weight that you want out of that piece of wood, you can use any kind of wood. It doesn't matter. There are no magical pieces of wood. I've got some nice light cedar here. This is southern maple, more cedar, more maple. I guess I got a lot of maple. I guess we're making it out of maple this time, which is not a bad deal since maple is easy to carve. And I'll put a link to that podcast in the description. Really had a pretty interesting conversation for almost 2 hours. But the idea in wood selection is to make sure it's going to be suitable for what you're going to do with it. If you're going to be carving very fine details, be sure you get a nice hardwood that can hold up to being carved and won't fuzz out on you or chip. So we're going to use the maple. It's going to be good. It's kind of a middle of the road wood, middle of the road density, easy enough to carve, and easy enough to get the right amount of weight in it to have this lure be very slow sinking. Let's get it drawn on this board, and then we'll talk about the actual dimensions. All right, there's the drawing. The fins are there just for reference, but you can see where the sections are going to get cut. And I never put my dimensions on my drawings, but for those of you who want to try to copy this, I'm going to go ahead and give you the dimensions. Let's go back to the dry erase board. I've got a couple written up here already. The length of the hard body, not the tail, is 4 inches, which is right at 10.1 centimeters. The thickest part, or actually the highest part, is 1 1/8, which is right at 3 centimeters. And the thickest looking down is going to be right at 5/8, which is about 1.6 centimeters. The tail is probably going to be about 1 inch long and about 1 inch wide. The distance from the very nose to the first hinge pin is going to be about 3/4 of an inch, maybe 7/8. The distance to the next joint is going to be about 1 1/4 inches. And the next segment is going to be the same, 1 1/4 inches. So at least you got a general idea of how to arrange yours when you start making yours. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, how are you going to get this cut out? It's going to be tough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the main body and the head separately. So to be able to cut out the head and the body separately, I've got to get the drawing of the head over here separate. So I made a copy. So I'm just going to cut that head off. And I'm going to stick it right on top of the tape. All right, two-headed monster. All right, I've got a center line here because the next thing I really need to do is make sure I've got my order of operations correct. One of the complicated parts of making a complex lure like this is knowing what to do first and what to leave for last. And I want to be able to cut my joints partially through, since these are going to be V-joints, these two are, before I actually cut out the lure. This way I have nice flat sides to work with. And as far as the head is concerned, what I'm going to do, I've never done this before, so I'm making this up as we go along here. I'm going to cut the body out and then cut out this little gill opening here for the joint. And when I've got this more or less how I like it, I'm going to put it over this and trace it out so I have a really good representation of what I've already cut. And creating as many guidelines as you can, reasonably, and lines across the side to align the blade on the saw. All right, so there's probably a million ways to get this done, but to be accurate, you got to have some sort of technique. You can just score the line like I just did here on this one, and then start cutting on a 45, eyeballing your line here for your guideline. Or you can take this thing to a bandsaw and slowly cut this edge, which that's a real easy way. But if you don't have a bandsaw, you can just make a jig of some kind. A simple one is just to have a 45-degree block of wood and you just hot glue it down, use that as your guide. That's what we're going to do today. So we'll just glue this down with a couple dots of hot glue. Don't need that much strength. And I'll line it up with the cut I've already made, keeping the blade hard on my little wedge. All right, with these things cut more or less accurately, I'm ready to cut out the actual shape. First thing I'm going to do is cut off the part up here that I'm not going to use. So after a bit of fiddling around with some sandpaper, we got a pretty good fit and pretty good alignment. So I'm going to go ahead and glue these together with some hot glue, and then we'll start shaping the whole lure. Of course, I got to finish cutting this head out. And I'm just injecting some hot glue into the gap. And when that cools, we'll start shaping this thing. And that's more or less the contour I want. You can see the nose sort of dips in pretty quickly up here and then flattens out by the head. And then it just has like a standard contour going back to the tail. So I'm going to take off some of this meat and then we'll go to the belt sander to do the rest. All right, so once I have it more or less the shape I wanted and a pretty good symmetry, it's not perfect just yet. I've got to round off the top and the bottom and taper the bottom to a slightly smaller thickness than the top, just a little bit. And that's mostly to have some extra buoyancy on top for some extra stability. So now I'm going to go ahead and just start tapering the belly and taking a little bit off the top, but not too much, like a good haircut. This is more or less the state I like to leave it in after I'm done with the belt sander, because the belt sander just takes off a lot at one time, so I have to be a little bit careful. So from here, it's all hand sanding. All right, before we cut the rest of the slots and pull the head off, I need to go ahead and drill the hole for the hinge pin. That hole's going to be a little bigger later, but now we have a nice aligned bore all the way through it.
With the lure shaped and smooth, it's time to separate the pieces. This is a little tedious, but just have to have a little patience.
Whew. All right, in order for the head to rotate on the pin, I'm going to have to round off these corners to give it room to pivot. Also, I'll need to hollow out in here a little bit for the opposite side of the gill to rotate in. We'll put a little temporary pin in there for a hinge, and it looks pretty good. This is the area that I want to be really flashy, so when this thing is swimming, it's flashing this bright red. All right, well, there's a storm coming through and we might lose power. But right now, typically what I would do is cut these slots. I don't want to do this just now. I actually want to leave this lure exactly this way and make a mold. Because this is really the critical part of making a lure, especially making the master if you're going to make a mold. But even if you're making a one-off lure, right here is where you could make a mistake that you maybe can't repair and end up having to start over, which that would be a pain. But we have a couple of tricks up our sleeves. One, this stuff. This is remeltable silicone. And if you've been watching my channel, you've seen me use this a couple of times on a couple of videos. This is a mold made from it, and it's absolutely kind of magical. It makes lure making a little less precarious. So right now I can make a mold of this, which is, what would you call this, like 3/4 of the way done, and then cast this partially done lure in casting resin. Then I can finish everything. I can cut the slots, and I do want to do a little extra work on the head. It's super plain, and I always wanted the gill plate to flare a little more, maybe a 1/16 of an inch or so like 2 or 3 millimeters out on either side, and then add a little detail around the mouth and a nice eye socket. And I'd rather do all that on a casting, screw that up and then do another casting, than to do it on this and have it be a critical failure where I have to make another head. That would be really difficult. So let's go ahead and make a mold. So I'm doing it the same way I would do it with any other silicone. I'm embedding these guys in a clay bed. The only difference is that this stuff has to be heated up to be able to pour. You can't pour something hot on clay because it'll dissolve. So I've come up with a little bit of a trick I'll show you in a minute. And you'll notice that I haven't really put any of the hardware on here. I haven't worked out how much weight to put in it. All that stuff can be done with the casting that I'm going to make out of this mold. It gives me a lot more freedom to experiment with this thing after I've already spent so much time shaping and carving the lure. And that makes for the possibility of having a much more refined lure and not just making a sort of almost perfect one-off lure. I'll get back to you when I've got this set up and we can start pouring this temporary mold. All right, I've got this done. I put some vents in it and everything. Probably didn't need to because this is going to be rough casting. But the secret to being able to pour that hot liquid silicone on here is to stick it in the freezer. We're going to go ahead and let that get super cold, probably 2 hours worth of cold, and then we should be able to pour that hot stuff on top. All right, we're just going to set this down and I'm going to try to level it. And then we can start pouring. And I want to do it pretty quickly. Get all the those keys filled in and then get everything else poured. All right, that should do it. I don't want to leave it out here because I'm a little afraid that the heat will start to propagate down into that clay. So I'm going to go ahead and move it just to the refrigerator, not the freezer, just in hopes that we don't mess up the clay.
The first half of the mold is ready. I stuck it in the freezer to get that silicone really cold because now I've got to pour hot silicone over cool silicone, and I'm hoping it won't melt that lower part of the mold.
All right, now it's just a matter of waiting, I don't know, probably about an hour, maybe 2, to get this thing nice and cool. I'll let it sort of gel and then I'll put it in the fridge. But I want to give the thing a chance to bubble off. All right, it's been a while. It's ready, I hope. Moment of truth, let's go ahead and unbox and open it up. Was nice clean. Fingers crossed. Oh no, it didn't work. Oh wait. It's coming open, but it's putting up a fight. I think I probably should have put a little more of that mold release on there. Yeah, it's definitely not happy coming open. But hopefully, if I take my time here, we won't rip it. I really think it's more a heat issue than it actually bonding to itself, because it is coming off pretty nice. Yeah, it's just a matter of taking your time and getting these things to unbond. Not horrible, not exactly perfect either. Yeah, pretty happy with that, considering how bad it might have been. All we need to do now is hold it together, pour our first set of segments. It'll have to be the end of the day. It's already dark out and I've got a few things to do inside. So I'll see you guys in the morning. All right, beautiful sunny day today, no rain in the forecast, and that's great for us because our goal today is to go ahead and cast the lure, completely assemble it, make sure all the weight is correct in it, and take it to the lake and see how well it swims. So what I've done is cast just one piece here, just the head. And the reason I've done that is that I'm going to use the head to establish the density of this material. Let's get the weight of it before we check the volume. All right, so we got 2.36 grams. That's the weight. And now we're going to go ahead and find the volume of this thing. I'll go ahead and zero out the scale with the water on it. And I just stuck this little thin piece of wire into the back of this so I can hold on to it. And now we're just going to submerge it, not touching the sides or the bottom, obviously. So we got 3.2. Let's check that again. 3.22. So because of the weight of it in water is our volume, this is 3.22 cubic centimeters. We know that the volume is more than the weight, so it will float. So our density is 0.733 or thereabouts grams per cubic centimeters. So it gives us a nice sort of slightly heavy but still floaty material to go ahead and work with. This way we don't have to add a bunch of weight in there. So to be able to pour all the parts, I've got 12 grams of part A of the resin, and I need to put 1.9 grams of this fine powder, which is actually microscopic glass spheres or micro balloons. And at first it looks like you'll never be able to stir it in. And we just stir this in, and you can see it starts to turn into a nice batter. And add 12 grams of part B. Now I just need to stir this. Don't have much time. Gotta get it stirred up well. And this should be enough to pour all 4 pieces. Looks like I had more than enough. Just let that set. Okay, let's see what we got. That looks perfect. Except for that one little lobe right there that didn't get poured. So I'm going to pour this one again. In the meantime, we'll work on the weight for the rest of them. I've got to cut the slots on these pieces. And I'm going to do that with a Dremel and the little discs. And they're doubled up. I don't know if you can see that. But before I get to the hinge slots, I'm going to just go ahead and do the slot for the little top fin. So here's our full body with everything except for the hardware. And we're at 15.8 and we were predicting at right at 16, so that's pretty doggone close. Now we need to know what it weighs with all the hardware it's gonna have on it. We got 22.7, so we need to add a little bit of weight to get up there around 25, maybe a little more than 25. So we'll try that split shot, and that leaves us about 1 gram. This is the closest one I have to a gram. Let's see what we got. 25.46. I like that. I'm going to go with that. It's time to go ahead and get this thing assembled. I'm going to drill a hole for the small weight on the front part of the body and a hole in this one for the larger one. Got the weight in, and I've got it sealed up with some UV resin. We can assemble this thing now. All right, it's assembled. I even put a little temporary tail on it so it would look like the final version will, I hope. I'm not going to do anything else to it. I'm not going to put any finish on it or anything. I want to make sure it's going to swim well.
So the next time you see this, we'll be on the boat, on the lake, and hopefully get some really nice underwater shots. All right, guys, just playing around a little bit before we do our lure test. Check out the sky, man. Look what the weather did. Yuck. Anyway, it's really windy out there. I'm tucked into this little bay. Actually, this is Melrose Bay in Santa Fe Lake. Here's our test specimen. And check it out. I painted a little gill surface so that we can see how it's going to actually flash. Hopefully, the camera will pick it up underwater. We have low light situation, so water's semi-murky, so it may not be the most epic underwater experience. So I'm going to go ahead and hook this up and just see how it swims and casts. And I'm going to use a quick clip. Otherwise, I would tie a loop knot on this. Here we go. Let's see how it works. Okay, I'm just going to drop it in the water. Oh man, look at that thing swim. Nice. Doesn't look like the tail is causing any issues. Nice. Let's see what kind of cast we can get on it. That thing swims so nice, and it's just the right weight. Let's see exactly how quickly it sinks. So let's take a look. Oh yeah. It looks like about a foot per second, maybe a little bit faster. Let's try to get some underwater shots. I think this is a great time to ask for a thumbs up if you're enjoying this kind of content. And if you're not subscribed, definitely subscribe. And don't forget, I've got a bunch of master classes in a playlist on the channel that you can check out anytime you're considering making a lure and want to get all the details. All right, enough chatter. Let's go ahead and put this in the water. I like to start slow with swim baits. It usually reveals a little more about the action than the fast retrieve does. And here I'm seeing a little more roll in the body than I really want. A little faster, and it starts looking a little more fluid. It's still showing a little bit of roll. You can see it if you watch that top fin. It kind of rolls more than you really want it to. I think that's a tie-on-eye issue. I think if I lower that tie-on-eye just a little bit, it should make it perfect. What I'm really curious to see is if that gill flashes red when you look at it from behind. Let's see it in slow motion. Oh yeah. I think that's really working. Even in fast motion, you can really see it when you're looking from behind. Just what a predator would see. I think I'm gonna call this a win. Alright, I hope I got some good shots. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for sticking around till the end. Let me know what you think of all this stuff. I'd love to hear your opinions on this stuff and your suggestions, maybe for the next lure. Leave them in the comments. I'll be happy to chat with you there. And don't forget, there'll be a couple of links in the description for a masterclass on swim baits and that podcast I was on. I think you'll find it interesting. All right, guys, I'll see you on the next one. I post every other Sunday. And I'm going to do a little more fishing, so if you guys are still jonesing for some lure making or fishing action, check out these two playlists right up here and enjoy.